as a lover, I've actually had to teach my woman how to allow herself to receive. Because in the past, she used to always be worried about, am I having fun? Am I having a good thing? And so me just continually to assure is like, hey, you be present. You surrender. Like that's a key. Like me whispering in her ear, surrender. I've got you. I've got you taken care of. Then in that space, it allows her to open herself up fully to fully receive me. Speaking of which, a beautiful goddess just walked in with some.
You can't really fit in your screen. It's a very small screen. Hi, guys.
We're just talking about how much I love you, and how much I love loving you.
Amazing. I love to be loved.
It's her birthday today. So after this, I'm going to make sure I spend many hours practicing what we're talking.
Welcome, tribe. I'm Maya Rose.
And I'm Gerald Rogers. We're about to embark on another mind-expanding episode where we dive deep into the realms of psychedelics, sex, and the superconscious.
This is a transformational experience of healing, manifestation, increased clarity, flow, and alignment.
So join us on this sacred journey as we receive the codes of transformation from scientists and psychonauts, shamans, tantra masters, mystics, and more.
Together, we'll unravel the secrets of plant medicine, sex magic, and other tools to tap into higher states of consciousness.
So why are we here? To answer the call, to share our passions, and to be advocates for alternative healing.
So get ready for a ride that transcends the ordinary and leads you to the extraordinary, because living a legendary life is not just a choice.
It's a sacred adventure.
I've been so excited about this conversation to drop in with Michael Hrostoski and Rob Kancler. They're two guys that are like leading the charge in helping men discover deeper levels of masculinity and knowing how to be better lovers and understanding what it means to be a sex god, and all of these things that we just don't talk about, in culture. And most of us have a very shitty and horrible sex education growing up. I don't know about you, but like I grew up in a very religiously strict culture, where you just don't talk about sex. Like it was never discussed. I never had conversations with my parents. I never had conversations with my friends. And so I got married and I was a virgin and I knew nothing about sex, and it was awful. It was horrible. And I always feel bad about acknowledging this, but I didn't even know what a clitoris was until I was almost 40 years old. And I just think most people, like our education around sex comes around, pornography or through these very inadequate sources to teach us actually what it means to be great lovers and great men. So I want to start with this question. Like, I would love to hear just some stories, some sex stories from beyond, like, when have you felt like a sex god? Give us a moment, an experience, and a glimpse into what that feels like and what that looks like within a relationship. Michael, I want to start with you.
Yeah, I would share, I'd say the first moment that it all clicked, I remember I was at a workshop with a pretty well-known teacher in sacred sexuality, and there was a moment where there was just a woman just kind of sitting on my lap, and she had an orgasm from zero touching, zero kind of like stimulation of breasts and genitals, fully clothed, and it was just from consciousness and breath. And I remember in that moment simultaneously thinking, like, holy fuck, that just happened, and how do I learn more? What is this? What just happened? I had no idea any of this happened. And I'd say over the past probably 12 years, I've just explored this conversation of sexual mysticism with anyone who could have the conversation with myself. And I would always just feel so delighted when I could be in the conversation, especially with other brothers who had, more of like a multidimensional, kind of mystical understanding of sex, from a grounded place, not bragging or, like, look at how cool I am or look at the skills that I have, but just like this almost like childlike curiosity of wonder and awe of isn't this amazing what we can do with our bodies and what can happen when we show up not being in our heads and not with any kind of agenda, but just like truly like enjoying the pleasure of our own existence and connecting with another human being in a deeply embodied, soulful, heart to heart kind of way. And it's just been a wild ride for the past decade. And I look forward to sharing more of what that ride's been like. So,
Yeah, Rob, what about you?
Great question. Happy to be here with you guys. So, what comes to mind is actually there's three different kind of categories, and maybe this is something I discovered doesn't really work. But the first three things that come to mind categorically are some sort of expression that feels really authentic to my like primal nature, or like what my body really wants to be doing in a way that feels so deeply satisfying and cohesive. So that's one. The second thing that comes up is like having a incredible embodied understanding of what the female erotic opening and orgasmic process is about, and being like inside of that with a sense of knowingness about what that process is and what it needs. And then the third one I would say is something like mysticism, when there's a mindless knowing, some sort of state akin to shamanic experience or voyaging. I'll start with a story from beyond about the third one, where once I had an experience where I was laying with my mouth against my partner's neck, and there was this vivid sense of the tissues in my lips communicating with her blood as it was flowing underneath the tissues in my lips. And there was like a memory of reminding her blood that it could be ecstatically orgasmic as it was flowing through her body. And as it like went through the checkpoint of my lips or whatever, I had this opportunity to basically help her whole body fill with blood that remembered it was orgasmic, or it could be orgasmic. And this experience was obviously unusual. And she paused and was just in awe of this moment and was like, what the fuck are you doing right now? And we just had this sweet eye contact of like, okay, do you feel safe? You good? Like, let's talk about this later, and just resume the immersion of it. But yeah, this was a very memorable experience that was certainly off the map of anything that I had previously considered before, and it happened through emergence. Something was just like, here you go, play there. So yeah, I can also maybe share some examples of the other two categories, but maybe that's enough to roll the ball forward.
Yeah. I mean, let's continue to share stories and share experiences. I love being, for me, with my lover Maya Rose. Like, she has taught me a whole different capacity of love making and what that means. And I remember with her, we frequently experience something we call a cosmic orgasm. So a cosmic orgasm, some people call it an extended response orgasm, but what happens during a cosmic orgasm is in the lovemaking process, I'll be driving the energy through her root chakra, sacral chakra, and driving the energy up. And she's in such a deep space of surrender and trust that as she climaxes, it's like this blast of energy that shoots through the crown of her head. And as she climaxes, then all of a sudden she'll leave her body. She'll just shoot straight to the center of the universe, almost like she's in the middle of a DMT journey. Because I think some DMT is actually released in that moment, and she leaves and her whole body goes limp. And I just get to like hold this space for her for sometimes 30, 60 seconds as she's like traveling the cosmos. And then all of a sudden she comes back and she's like, whoa, and she shares like all of these mystical things she saw and experienced and did. And the first time it happened, I was like, what's going on? Do I like, and then, but every time it happens, like there's these miracles that occur because of it. And it changed my perception of sex, right? Beyond just being something pleasurable, I saw it as something that could be really like a mystical experience, a healing experience, something that so many like miraculous manifestations have come when she allows herself to go in that heightened state. And it's been beautiful watching, these experiences happen quite frequently in our lovemaking, and I think it has a lot to do with what we're going to be talking about today. How, as men, we step into the full embodied version of us so that we can hold and guide our women into these sacred states, but then also, how to treat sex in this like really safe space. There's one other story that I think is relevant, especially for this podcast, Psychedelic Sex and the Superconscious, because as a couple, one of the things that we've done to support our relationship a lot is about once a month, we'll drop in with some psychedelics and medicine and have just this outrageous lovemaking experience. And one time when we were in Hawaii, shortly after Burning Man last year, we went there and we dropped in with some heart medicine, some MDMA, and we ended up making love for like 5 hours. It was just so outrageous, so amazing. She kept like having these cosmic orgasms. It was really intense because she just kept climaxing over and over again for like 5 hours straight. And at the end of the experience, she's like, "What was that? That was unbelievable." And I just asked her, like, "How many times do you think you climaxed? How many times do you think you orgasmed?" She's like, "I don't know, at least 40, And it was so different than anything I had experienced before. I literally think in my first marriage of 16 years, I don't think my first wife ever orgasmed once. I don't think she did. I think I was so clueless in terms of how to tune into her energy and support her and love her and to like really focus on nurturing, that experience with her, that I didn't even know how to give her an orgasm. And then fast forward, this extraordinary experience with my Rose. And so I feel like what we're going to be sharing today as these codes, as these codes of lovers, as these codes of demasculine, I think they're really important for people to understand, because I think every man wants to give these experiences to their ladies, but so often we just don't know how to do it. So I would love to hear from you guys. Like, what was your experience in terms of learning how to be a great lover? What was that process like for you, Michael?
Yeah, I'd say after kind of like peeking through the veil, right? After having an experience of something that some people would label as like mystical or supernatural, but with the research that I've done and with all the people that I've talked to, I believe it's really just available for all of us. Like once we peel away the conditioning and like work through the trauma stuck in our body. So I think being a sex god is just like an ordinary thing, just truly for like it's available for everyone. I would say a lot of my exploration happened from, I think, being in partnership and lovership from, very like just very well practiced like sexual practitioners or different women, different like mystics who were, in the lovemaking, there'd be these experiences like, seeing the Big Bang, or, both going into like a shared samadhi state, or experiencing her in full unity consciousness, but like completely inside her body. It's all sorts of different kinds of orgasms that like spiraled in or exploded out, just all so much variety. And I think that was probably most of it. Also, any time that I had, when these experiences first started happening, I really didn't have anyone to like talk about, to talk to about them. And then every once in a while, I might be at a gathering or something, and I'd be able to make that connection with someone. And then it would be like long lost friends sharing something that's so sacred and so special. And then in that place, we would, I guess you can call it sharing codes or sharing experiences. And in that, we would like impart to each other different potentialities within our imagination, within life. So a lot also came from that. I'd say a lot has come in the past 9 months of, working and teaching alongside Rob, who has, like 15 years of experience in these spaces. Up until meeting Rob, I feel like I had some like the wildest sex stories from beyond of any human that I knew. Like there were probably maybe 4 other men that I knew that I'd ever even be able to have a conversation. And, Gerald, you were one of them. And then I remember one day jumping on Zoom with Rob, and then Rob's like, well, this is possible, and this is possible, and this is possible, and this is possible. And I was just like, holy shit, where have I been? And again, right, it's not like a competition, right? Like we're not trying to like win some scoreboard, leaderboard thing. But it is around just like fully experiencing ourselves and fully experiencing this amazing gift that we have from being human. So yeah, I'd say that's a majority of it, just through direct experience. Of course, I read like a lot of the books, like a lot of the Montauk Chia stuff, and basically any book that had anything to do with sexuality, I read it. But I honestly learned most of it like through my body, and most of it just through curiosity and following hunches. And I'll just give like one simple example. I was sitting with my partner at the time, and she was like laying on my lap, and I sensed like a spot in her ass that like wanted to be spanked, and I just like spanked it, and then that spot like went to another part on her ass, and then I spanked there, and then it went somewhere else, and I spanked there, and then her mind caught up to what I was doing, and she went, "Oh my God, like that's so weird. Like, how did you know that?" And I said, like, I don't know, but just my body can now listen to your body. And I think a lot of that came from, I used to teach yoga. I've done a lot of meditation, like 10-day silent meditation retreats, just a lot of sitting with the sensations of my own body. But the more that I've sat with the sensations of my own body, with my own emotions, I'm just a more clear like mirror or receptor for what's happening in the bodies of other people. So I can feel like pleasure patterns in how a woman wants to be touched. I can feel, patterns of pain of, where someone has pain, and I can, run healing energy there. And I really do believe that this is possible for all of us once we detox our bodies, feel our emotions, let go of all the, kind of stuckness and trauma that's in there. There's just like this whole wild playground of experience that is so empowering, and just like the best fucking thing possible. So, so that's a little bit. Yeah, I'd say that's a little bit of my journey, and it's ongoing too. I mean, I'm consistently having new sexual discovery as I explore my body, and just like it never ends, which is, I think, one of the most amazing things that I've seen from friends and mentors in their 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s who tell me, Michael, I know this sounds crazy, but I'm having the best sex of my life in my 60s. I would have never guessed, but like it just keeps getting better and better. Mm-hmm. So I've been very grateful for those men and women in my life who've shown that, like, yeah, everything going to shit or going downhill, like that's just a myth. Like many of the other myths that we are like transcending and evolving in this time of great change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for that. It's such a gift knowing that there's always more to learn. There's always ways to enhance our capacity to experience pleasure and to give pleasure, to like really be in fully embodied. And I love that I think a big part of this is just being in the mystery, being in that curiosity, being in the wonder, and just like always being willing to explore. Rob, I'm so curious about your story and kind of the journey that led you to where you're at right now.
Yeah. Do you have any more specific lines of inquiry?
Well, talk to me about like what you were like as a lover prior to embarking on this journey and the deep study that you've done, and then what it's like now. Like what are the key things that allowed you to learn how to embody these ideas?
Beautiful. Yeah, big questions. I can try to wrestle with them. My first impulse is like, I don't really know how to like make that clear distinction. I think for me, like there's always been some sort of fascination with like understanding what is possible for intimacy, or for like harmonious, deep contact or like unity with another person. And I think this, I have some theory or maybe felt sense that this may come out of trauma, the unique flavor of trauma that I have that maybe isn't super unique, that relates to like me being a source of my mother getting her emotional needs met when I was super little. So I think part of the opening of this channel or channels in my system came from that being some sort of weird enmeshment with my mother when I was super young, all the way up through adolescence. And then when the shift naturally happens from my mother being like the love of my life or whatever to me being interested in girls, that there was still this kind of deep feeling of something about meeting emotional needs. And yeah, I remember when I was just telling Michael the story that I was maybe like 8 years old or something like that, and I first learned about some sexual act or whatever, and was like pretending that I was with my pillow, like my bed pillow or whatever, imagining that it was a girl when I was maybe, I think like 8 or 10 or something. And I just remember like the experience of a lot of the things that we teach in our work, like stuff related to attunement and like finding a pacing and feeling my own kind of body intelligence about what sort of pacing was attuned to the field. And all of this was just like based on imagination, of course, because it was a pillow, not a human being. But I remember these things that I think are so central to what I have since discovered were there from a very early age for me. And I think in that way, that's pretty unique. I've had all kinds of like extreme issues and pathologies that are in other departments more related to like aliveness and primality, have been more things that I've had to learn and discover, and I'm still kind of arriving more into. But there have been certain things that I would say are like the most reliable channels of deep, intimate exploration have been present for me for as long as I can remember, I think, related to this, not so positive part of my developmental process. So that's one thing. Another, just to kind of throw another kind of factor on the table here, is this exploration around what me and Michael in our work are talking about, like true fuck, or like what is actually the authentic expression of primal horniness being coordinated through the body in a way that's actually like coherent from, let's say, this charge, like this horniness that seems more like genital focused or sacral center focused, being coordinated through the whole body, and being coordinated not just through my body but in relationship to my partner's body, has been something that came much later. And I think this is not always the case, that some men get that before the deep attunement to emotional needs piece comes into play. But for me, that was a much later discovery of like, what does it really feel like for the raw kind of primordial life force energy coming from my genitals to be coordinated through the like musculature of my body into a lovemaking process with a woman's body, is something that I think I discovered by just focusing on sensations. I think it's the same thing that we say a million times, is like going slow enough to kind of see through self-deception and the kinds of ways that our more frenetic energy or more denser impulses can read as a worthwhile direction when that may not necessarily be the case, and to develop a more nuanced and detailed understanding with the sensational landscape to be able to track what actually opens into ranges where I might find something that is truly beautiful and connective, versus limited, which is a term that me and Michael talk about in our work a lot, is like limited versus limitless sex, and like what are the different categories, or let's say outcomes or illustrations of these different categories, and how can we as men become much more literate in a way to tracking if we're heading in a direction that is limitless in a way, or if we're heading in a direction that will lead to contraction or tension or disconnection, or a need for ejaculation to complete the alchemical process. Yeah, if you have more questions, I'm happy to keep riffing. I think that there's so many directions that I can go here that I'm just kind of feeling my way through it.
You touched on some interesting things that have my mind stirring, because I think one of the things that have been most impactful in my connection with my goddess is learning how to bring more energy into other chakras beyond just the sacral chakra. Because I think in the past, most of the time I fucked, it was just like sacral chakra. It's just like my dick was horny and I just like wanted that experience. But in the cosmic lovemaking, it's something so much deeper. And then instead of like ejaculation being the goal, it's like the experience in the moment is the goal. And so lovemaking, rather than being a quick 5-minute quickie, it's a hour-long ceremony. You know, it's an hour-long journey of like really deepening our connection and opening our hearts. And while the sacral chakra, the root chakra are like really alive with that sexual energy, it's also opening up our hearts and feeling that figure eight of energy moving between us. It's opening up our third eye and our crown together and feeling that sensation, and even opening our voice. And so it becomes this full embodied experience of lovemaking, rather than just, sticking my cock in her pussy. Right. So I think that's a really critical thing that I think most men just aren't aware of, right? Like, how do you actually bring your full being into unity, into oneness, into this like merging of your souls with your partner. And then in doing that, another thing you touched on, which I think is really essential in the process of being a sex god, is like really the deep listening, really knowing how to listen and to feel into her energy, and not to rush it, but to be the invitation for her to open up with more and more sensation, more and more pleasure, and knowing what that looks like. Because for my goddess, sometimes, like Michael, you were sharing this, sometimes her energy is so in tune with mine that my hand can be, a foot, 2 feet off of her body, and her whole body's like shaking with energy, because it's like I'm just tuned in and I can feel that chord of energy and pleasure moving through her. And then sometimes it's the light touch, and sometimes the aggressive, like massage, and sometimes it's like pulling the hair, just like really just tuning into like what is the dance of energy that gets to flow between us, and not rushing it, not feeling like it's like, okay, let's hurry up and see how fast I can get off, right? Let's actually delay that, and even making it so it's not even like my experience isn't based on whether I ejaculate or not, right? To just be in the moment, and ejaculation is not the outcome. If it happens, it happens. But like the love making is every moment in that journey. Mike, I'm curious for you, like this idea of even being a sex god, like what does that mean to you? And what is it about, I guess, the common culture around sex that prevents men from being able to like really be that tuned in with their women?
I'd say simply it's experiencing your divinity. Having a direct experience of your divinity as you're having sex. What's interesting is that, like, in a way it's very uncommon, but then in a way it is also common, and like something that I feel very I feel very, very grateful that Rob and I get to create these spaces for men to just have honest conversations like they've never had before in their lives. I mean, some of the men are 40, 50, 60, and they're like, yeah, I remember one time with this one lover, something opened up, and then like, I saw her as an animal, or something happened, and like I felt like I was looking at the cosmos, or something happened, and I just knew that I was one with everything. And many people, if you've asked them, like they might have had just like a little micro glimpse of something that was just super expansive or far greater than, what they saw from their conditioning and their programming from, from porn or from their priests, or from their parents. But oftentimes people shut down things that are, outside of their context of what they know, because they're afraid, because they have no concept of what that is. So yeah, I mean, in short, I'd say, being a sex god is, allowing yourself to experience both the divine and the animal aspects of you, which is the goal of many ancient sacred traditions, like yoga, which means union, right? It's like the yoking and the union of the body and spirit, and experiencing that in lovemaking, which something that I just want to keep saying is like, it's possible. It's these aren't like imaginary fantasies that we're talking about. They're actual embodied experiences that rival, for me personally, that rival some of the, the wildest psychedelic experiences that I've had. And I've done 5-MeO DMT several times, and I've been to Peru several times, and I've sat with ayahuasca a number of times. And, it's a very, very similar frequency of what can be accessed, in the body, just from essence meeting essence. So yeah, I'd say that's the best that I have to answer a challenging question. and something that Rob and I have been really, really working on. For the past 9 months, we've just been like coming to the edges of our ability to like describe this like amazing, seemingly miraculous thing that has awakened in our bodies. And we've just continued to just try and distill it to the most like practical, pragmatic, universal, non-dogmatic way possible. So more and more men can go, oh, that's what that is, and that's possible, and that's possible for me. It's like, yeah, it's possible for you because you're alive and you're a man and you're human, and you have the same capacity that all three of us have. That we've just maybe explored a little bit farther than say some men have, but like it's all here for us. It's like the kingdom of heaven is here, and you just have to give yourself permission to start exploring it.
What do you think it is that keeps a lot of men, maybe most men, from ever even exploring or believing these things are possible? Do you think it's just like ignorance? They're not even aware this exists? Or do you think it's like bad education that they've heard, or like core beliefs? Like what's like the real block that keeps people from experiencing that energy of being what we're calling a sex god?
Yeah, for me, it was ignorance. Like I didn't know any of this existed. My sex education was, growing up in a very religious family, and sneaking glimpses of porn using our like 56K modem when my parents would leave and like go to the grocery store, and like a little like dick burglar, like trying to masturbate as like quickly as possible to try and like sneak out an orgasm. Like that those were my formative sexual experiences, and those are the formative sexual experiences of many young men, especially so today with iPhones and tablets. So for me, I would say it was ignorance. Also, I think also one of the biggest things is that the male ego rarely wants to admit that like he's not good at something, or that he doesn't understand something, and the male ego will often just push things away that would be so good for him, that would help him have like amazing sex, harmonious relationships, make way more money, vital health, just all these things that really everybody wants. They're like, for the most part, universal desires. But sometimes a man might say, I don't need that. There's nothing wrong with me. I know what sex is. She doesn't complain. I'm fine. It's good enough as it is. And that's his like, that's like the death sentence for what he could be experiencing. So I'd say I'd say for the most part, it'd be like a mix of ignorance and ego from my standpoint. I know Rob would probably have something to add. Rob has been like truly a deep researcher on this for many years. So I'm curious what other angles that you'd have, Rob, maybe.
Thank you, Michael. I agree. I think ignorance is one of the biggest things, and it plays, as I see it, in a couple ways. One of them is that I think men are pretty, from what I've seen and speaking to men from different backgrounds, different age groups, there seems to be like a general consensus that like, oh, I already know what that is. Like I know what sex is. I already kind of have it mapped. I know what it's about. And like, this is my place in that map, basically. And I think the ego piece plays into it directly, that I think it's very confronting to admit that like, oh, this thing that's very central to my identity and self-esteem and confidence and the way that I kind of track my like value as a man and as a partner or whatever is actually like way off. I think that there's a block that a lot of men have to even considering like, oh, maybe I've just been completely misinformed, if not just like straight up delusional and naive about this very central part of being a human being. So I think that that's critical. And yeah, I feel a lot of compassion and in a big way, a sense of understanding that these things are in a way not even our fault. Like the game of sexual dysfunction was happening way before we even got here, and we just kind of joined the party midway and we're like, okay, cool, this is what we're doing. And yeah, so I think this piece of like we were really educated both by this sex suppressed I think like religiously informed foundation that seems like the promise is like morality and like good Christian morals or whatever, so like let's not talk about it. And then the other side is this whatever agendas are in media. So porn is obviously a huge source of sex education, and a great deal of porn, I think, because of neurochemical reasons and other kinds of addictions and fetishes, that people are going more and more towards extreme and violent and objectifying and degrading porn. And I think statistically this is proven that there's huge trends towards pornography preferences getting more and more extreme and violent, especially for younger people. So I think that being like the premise of like what people think sex is, or what aspirational sexual relationships or sexual experiences are, is very confusing for men, and probably also very confusing for relationships and for women too. Because I think people basically arrive at a place of thinking like, oh, that's what my perfect sexual life would look like, or if all of my dreams came true, or I was experiencing total satisfaction of my sexual proclivities, or the most satisfying things I could be, it would be like all of that weird shit that I figured out when I was in middle school or something. So I think this piece is one of the layers that I think men have this idea that like they've mapped out what sex is and what it is for them. And Gerald, I like what you say about how for a lot of dudes there's this idea that like the whole purpose of this is for me to just like, for me to come, like that's the whole thing. The whole point of sex is for me to climax, or to make my partner climax, or whatever, like that's the whole goal. And then even more, let's say like progressive or people that have been exposed to alternative ideas get the idea that the opposite is true, that like I'm supposed to not come. And based, back to this thing that you were saying about issues with circulation and like understanding how our systems and circuitry really work, and how things like sublimation or transmutation of energies can be possible in our systems, that even when somebody is like, oh, I don't want to come ever, I've decided that I'm over that or whatever, I'm too enlightened for busting nuts in my future self. So that they can't, because they don't know how to circulate energy. So the tendency is like, oh, when that energy doesn't know how to move throughout your body or into your partner, that it will know how to go out your dick. So the tendency will be to ejaculate. The body will just move in that direction when we don't know how to circulate energies for these, let's say, higher purposes, or to transmute them into different forms of energy that this kind of base primal force will need somewhere to go as it builds in its magnitude and intensity. And the path of least resistance would generally be out of your penis via the ejaculation mechanism. So I'm bouncing around here, but I think for me, what comes in the center of this conversation again and again is like intention. Like, what are we trying to do here? And I feel cautious when speaking with men or with people in general, that like there's just like a lot of assumptions in the conversation, even in like more mystical or like cosmic sex conversations, that there's a lot of like unacknowledged or unchecked assumptions about like, what is the goal? Like, what are we trying for? What is the purpose? Is it these like big orgasms? Is it these kind of alternative states of consciousness, these extraordinary experiences? Like, what is it? Like, what is this even for? What is this about? So when I think about like indoctrination and conditioning and education and how to take responsibility for pioneering your own discoveries and for your own sexual life, that I think this inquiry about like, what is this for? Like, what are you doing? Is one of the most generative inquiries that I found personally, and from working with a lot of guys at this point, that piece, like really taking that seriously and exploring it from embodiment and from presence and attunement and connection, is a really useful thing to kind of point our headlight in the direction of. Because it's so easy to just be like, well, there's a primal urge, or like I somehow want to be like affirmed in my masculinity. There's so many other factors. Like I want to be like the guy who somehow makes her have the most profound experiences she's ever had. Like all these things are great. I'm not meaning to say that I have value judgments about it, but I think that the inquiry about like what is nature doing here, and what is like the highest value or expression that I resonate with, like actually, for the way that I come in contact with my partner and the way that this sexual energy moves in my body, of like, what is it doing? Because what I've seen in myself is that what often happens is there's just like a default to these very kind of basic urges. And then when we start to look around like expressions of love and service and expansion and being a conduit for these different things, it seems to really open the playing field kind of by accident. It's like once there is this understanding that like there's potential for healing and profound expansion in this context, and when I attune to what that feels like, what those potential currents or frequencies feel like, that it offers awareness of things that were right in front of us that we didn't see when we were busy with this, like, oh, I just feel this fucking energy that wants to fuck you or something. And then when we orient around that, it only reveals so much, because that's all that matches that particular frequency or urge in the body and our orientation to what this is.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And just like really thinking like the intention, it often changes, you know, sometimes we're just horny, right? And sometimes we just want a good fuck and it just feels good and pleasure is like the outcome. And other times it's like that deep union of soul and feeling seen and met and like connecting heart to heart and having this experience where we feel like what it feels like for the full merger of the masculine and feminine to occur. And there's something so deep in our heart and our souls that happen. And sometimes there's the more cosmic mystical energy where maybe we're manifesting or creating, or like we just want to access these higher states of consciousness and then all the other, you know, aspects of what sex can do. And it's beautiful to have, you know, partners, you know, these women that are willing to dance in all these different realms with us, you know, and to be able to experience that. We just have about 10 more minutes that I want to dig in here. And I want to make sure that the guys that are listening today have some like really practical, okay, here's some things I can do as a lover, as a man, to show up as more of a sex god, right? And so I just want to like really quickly go through this, and maybe I'll share one, and then Michael, and then Rob, and we'll just kind of like spin through and get through as many as we can with this, and just have fun with like just sharing some of these codes, things. And I always think about this as things I wish I would have known. I wish I would have known, someone would have told me earlier on. So the first one I would say is just good sex happens long before the bedroom. It happens in making love every day, and like really seeking that, knowing that making love happens when I'm cleaning the dishes, or I'm, making the bed, or I'm just sending her a text during the day, or just sitting and listening and say, hey, tell me what's on your heart right now. And so for me, the real love making is an ongoing, everyday, every hour experience of like creating safety for my goddess to feel like she can clear her mind and just be fully present, and to know that she's being held as a woman in her whole experience in life. And so that's the first thing I would say. Just make love all the time, every day, in all the ways. Michael?
I'd say one of my favorite teachings that we teach in the program, it's around agendalessness. And it's, showing up with really no agenda, and truly listening on a moment to moment basis. We teach men something that we call quantum listening, but just like really listening without an agenda of how you want to take things, and just that one shift, really, from what I've seen from sharing this with a number of men over the past decade, just that one thing of just showing up from the place of like, what's here, and what's here in my body, and what's here in your body, and then just following the way that the energy wants to move, and it's so dynamic. And again, like you shared, it can go from hair pulling to just real gentle stroking of the cheek to like really like rough fucking to the slowest sex, where it's like you're just moving like a millimeter, but there's all this like orgasmic energy and sensation coming through, because that's what the bodies are desiring in that moment. Like that's what's authentic and congruent between the two of you in that moment. But if a man has an idea of like, all right, I'm going to fuck her, doggy style, and then I'm going to, do it this way, and then I'm going to do it this way, because, this is just what I do, and this is what I've seen, then that's the limit, like that's the limit on this like infinitely expansive playground that we have. So, just show up without any kind of agenda, and really embody agendalessness. And you may be surprised of just what like emerges from you. So that's that.
I kind of feel like agendalessness is just also full presence, like just present in the moment without projecting where that goes. Thank you. Rob?
I'll do a simple one and a deeper one. The simple one is just slow down. For me, slowing down has been one of the most generative things, to just realize how the pace in which I'm moving can really influence the amount of information, like how informed I am about what's going on in my system and in my partner's system by potential overstimulation or saturation. So slowing down, and that's by no means a small teaching. It's been one of the most profound things that I've kind of had in my toolkit. And the second thing that I'll share is, in all of this conversation about like our aspirations to be sex gods or whatever, I think one thing that can get touched is a lot of, let's say like pain or wounding or longings or grief or unworthiness, and just so much information can arise for so many of us around this topic that kind of skirts around something like lack, like something like we don't have it yet, or we don't have what we need, or something isn't enough. So what I would suggest is like, yeah, it's great to like move in the direction of progress and to like show up for different practices and to aspire to be better for ourselves and for others. And the practice of just like learning to be with oneself, to really sit with what comes up like the upsets and the grief and the longing and the pain, the sadness and the frustration or whatever is around that, and to actually allow yourself to have a relationship with these more potentially subtle or easy to suppress or pass over parts of this field of information is one of the most valuable things in my journey that relates to like real healing and nervous system integration, is to not just like move ambitiously towards change, but to also sit with yourself, to really be with what arises, and even the uncomfortable stuff too, and to practice doing both. It's like, yeah, I want to head in the direction of the awesome stuff I want in my future, and also there's part of the thing that might be motivating me to do that, or at the center of that is something that might be a little ouchy or long ago not yet integrated type of information. So those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, those are both great wisdom. Like so much of being like a powerful lover is like being able to have that love for yourself first, right? For me doing the work of shadow work, or like really exploring parts of me that I've abandoned or have not loved, like me learning how to nurture those are what allows me to hold so much space for my lover and everything she goes through.
Totally.
I think one of my codes that I think is really different than what I used to do is like I focus on her pleasure first, but it's interesting because I don't abandon my pleasure in doing that. In focusing on her pleasure, it just allows me to listen and be tuned in and to just be more sensitive to the nuances of the feminine. But then I recognize that in doing that, my pleasure is dramatically increased as well. But I look at like the love making as a sex goddess, it's like an act of giving. Like I'm giving my energy to this extraordinary experience of her pleasure. But in doing so, as a divine masculine, I receive as I give, and I receive simultaneously. And the more I give, the more I receive. And what I've learned is, as a lover, I've actually had to teach my woman how to allow herself to receive. Because in the past, she used to always be worried about, am I having fun? Am I having a good thing? And so me just continually to assure is like, hey, you be present. You surrender. Like that's a key. Like me whispering in her ear, surrender. I've got you. I've got you taken care of. Then in that space, it allows her to open herself up fully to fully receive me. Speaking of which, my beautiful goddess just walked in with some.
Hello.
Hello.
Can't really fit in your screen. It's a very small screen. Hi, guys.
We're just talking about how much I love you, and how much I love loving you.
Amazing. I love to be loved.
It's her birthday today. So after this, I'm going to make sure I spend many hours practicing what we're talking. Michael, do you have one more thought, one more
real quick
insight you want to
make in a response to 2 things that you said that are super rich and I think worth?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So in sequence, I'll go backwards. The last thing that you just said, we talk about how part of the nature of like feminine sexual needs is to be enjoyed. So there's a great part of her pleasure that will be about your pleasure. So ironically, there's this paradox where if you really do want to just pleasure a woman as much as possible, you need to enjoy her a lot, or you're not going to be able to bring her into that depth of pleasure just purely by nature of sexuality. That like your enjoyment will fuel her eros and orgasm directly, and not in like a psychological way, like on an energetic level. I find this to be true as well.
That's so true. Like even when I'm more vocal about my pleasure, it's like, oh my gosh, when I'm making sounds, she enjoys it more. When she's making sounds, I enjoy it more, because it's like that feedback that we're like really like creating a special experience for our partner. Yeah,
like I would go as far as to say is even profound enjoyment can catalyze orgasmicness opening. That's it. Like that depth of like ecstatic enjoyment of the feminine can be a catalyst for her orgasmic opening in and of itself, which is good to know.
That's beautiful.
Without any touch, just the pure from Rob's research.
Enjoyment. Yeah. And the second thing that I was going to say, you mentioned a little while ago, and a part of our journey has not only been trying to speak about things that are very abstract and, of course, experiential, and to put them in clear language. Another part of that is to make it as simple as possible. And I have thought a lot about this thing that you said a little while ago about how your ability to like hold space for her has to do with like where you've gone in yourself. And I think that that's really astute and correct. And one way that we talk about this in the work and that I experience it is it just has so much to do with capacity, that the capacity that I have to be with my own experiences and purely when I really kind of track it down to the nitty gritty, it has to do with capacity to be with sensations. That the more capacity that I have to be with intense and subtle sensations in my own body and in my own nervous system, the more I have capacity to hold space and to hold a field for others to expand into ranges and depths that they have not yet touched or felt safe to explore or consider. So this is just so literal, like our capacity for experience can directly affect the depth of penetration and space and envelopment that we can offer a lover or anyone for that matter. This is also true in healing work and amplified field explorations that don't have anything to do with the erotic necessarily. So, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Michael?
Yeah, just one that's been so important for me is that create some kind of like sexual brotherhood for yourself. So for me, for most of the past decade, I had a handful of friends who I could just share these experiences with, and we could just normalize healthy, mature discourse around the mysteries in a way that's like not competitive, in a way that's just like, hey, this happened. Oh, dude, I'm so happy for you. I'm going to try that. That just blew my mind. Thanks, dude. Thanks for sharing. And just like this, like just healthy, real, like inspiring, affirming of each other, which heals a lot of these wounds of like shame and isolation and competition and creates this like, I call it vitamin bro. It's like when you've been in like a really good men's group and you get this like this different kind of energetic, like a fortitude. Like there's like a fortification of spirit when men are sharing and supporting each other. So I would say, yeah, create some kind of sexual brotherhood. It can be your friends. It could be a few, you could join a program like ours. I love it. I think it's great. We have, 3 cohorts of men already in there, and a alumni group that's like forming around this work. But it's just, it makes it so much easier because most men hide this part of their life, this vital part of their existence from everyone. Some people only talk about their sex life with their therapists or not at all. So that whole existence is not validated by anyone outside of them. So it's just there in the shadows. But then when it's affirmed, I've seen so many men and like I've gone through such a deepening of my own sexual practice and peeling off layers of just subtle sexual shame from co-facilitating this program with Rob. I mean, I've had, I don't even know, like dozens and dozens of upgrades from hearing men's stories and just hearing certain things and, realizing certain shame that I had around my dick when I was a kid, or, someone will share some, awkward sexual experience when they're a teenager, and I'm reminded of the thing that happened to me when I was a teenager, and then I get to, be with that teenage aspect of myself. So yeah, just it's so vital, and it's just so helpful to just share with other mature, committed, growth-minded men who just simply want to have amazing, great sex because they can, right? something Rob and I ask ourselves a lot. It's like, is why not be great at sex, right? Like why not do what it takes to have good sex? And if you're listening to this, I really implore you to think, like, why not be great at sex? I'm so grateful that I stumbled onto these teachings, because I could easily not know any of this exists still. And I'm so grateful for the handful of teachers and other brothers like the two of you who've, shared experiences that have opened my mind. But, that I think that's the question that I would want to leave to anyone who's hearing this. It's like, why not be great at sex?
Yeah.
Why the fuck not?
Everyone can. I led a men's retreat down in southern Utah called King's Quest, and we had a bunch of guys, and just as part of the journey, we did all sorts of amazing things. One of the things we did, we all did a vision quest where we dropped one with a bunch of psilocybin. We all spread out and spend the day really tuning into our core purpose and what we're all about. And then we came back and gathered around the fire and just had these amazing experiences. And one of the nights, we sat around the fire and we just said, all right, share your best sex secrets, and also where you feeling vulnerable around that. But one of the guys told me about this thing that he did with his woman. I was like, oh my gosh, I've never tried that. So in this experience, he would just focus on putting the palm of his hand against the clitoris around that, and slide his two fingers up around the G spot, and then put his pinky down near the ass, and then he'd be sucking on the nipple, right? So you get four erogenous zones all at the same time, and just moving that. And I was doing that with my wife the next time we were together in Vegas. We had this hotel, and I was doing that, and the pleasure, the energy that was moving through her as I was pressing my palm against her clit and rubbing her G spot and getting her ass and then also her nipples all at the same time. It shot so much energy through her that she just exploded. She just squirted all over. She had never squirted before, but she squirted all over. She was screaming. She's like, "What is that?" And it was this moment. We absolutely destroyed the bed. But it was this moment. It was like, oh my gosh, I was given the gift of this code from one of my warrior brother men who offered that to me, and all of a sudden it's just opened my mind to what else don't I know? And so I think it's so important that we have safe places where we can learn how to be great at sex, where we can learn how to be better lovers, where we can learn how to be better men and how to step into deeper levels of masculinity. And so I think that's super important. And I would love for you guys just really quickly to share what you're up to and how those men that are listening can get more and learn more. Would you just be open to share a little bit about what you guys are creating, what you're up to, and what you guys excited about, and maybe some next steps for anyone that might be listening?
Yeah. So we, Rob and I have been running a program called Men of Substance. So it's a 9-week immersion into the foundations of sexual mastery. We created this system. So imagine you're just basically installing a higher sex operating system. So it's called Higher Sex OS. There's 6 core components. There's mindset upgrades. There's body upgrades. There's skill set upgrades. There's relationship upgrades. There's community upgrades, and there's imagination upgrades. So Rob and I basically created the most comprehensive, living system possible, just to really attack it at every angle, to give men, everything that they need to have these kinds of experiences. We've offered a money back guarantee for all 3 programs. We've had 0 refunds. We've had men who've been, married for 20 years, for 10 years, have their wives say things like, I trust you more than I ever have before, or I feel like we're dating again. So it's, just really, I've cried just from hearing some of the stories from the men, just really, really special work that these guys are doing. And then, we'll have a link in the show notes where you can check it out. The next program starts on June 11th. If you go to the website and you can still see it, then there's still spots available. I'm super accessible, so you can message me through the website or just find me on Facebook. Rob and I'd say something that I'm proud of is that we've really poured a lot into product. So we've both been studying internet marketing for a long time, and we could have, got more customers and, gotten more ads. But we've really just been like pouring everything into making like the actual product as good as possible. So every round we just keep adding, more classes, more components. We have this really rich like library of teachings that's like behind the front end of the program. And it just keeps getting better every time that more men join the program. So it's really like everything you need to have the best sex of your life, and that's the claim and the guarantee. And so far, we've had 0 refunds. So come and check us out.
That's a big thing, to give men the opportunity to have the best sex ever. I think that's incredible. Rob, do you have any final thoughts you want to share as we wrap up?
It's nice to be here. I feel inspired and curious I think we could have continued for 4 more hours or something and still only
easily. We could have,
for sure.
Yeah, and if I was one of the podcasters that had the 6-hour shows, we could have filled that with all sorts of juicy content. But that just means we'll need to have you come back. But for everyone that listened, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for being on this journey with us with psychedelic sex and the superconscious. There's so much we get to explore and so much we get to learn. And so please continue to join us. Hop onto pssshow.com to access the other episodes and to join the tribe and be part of the magic that's continuing to evolve. And with that, we love you guys so much. And just remember, this is your life. Make it legendary.
Thank you, legendary explorers, for joining us on this cosmic journey today.
Your curiosity fuels our exploration of psychedelics, sex, and the superconscious.
If you're hungry for more, dive into our website and connect with us on social media. All the links are in the show notes.
And stay tuned for our next mind-expanding episode. We can't wait to talk to you again in our next adventure.
Until then, remember, this is your life. So,
make it legendary.